Hey, everybody. It's your host, Erika Washington of Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. I can't believe it is episode number 17. And that doesn't really feel like a lot in the grand scheme of life because that's 17 weeks. But that's also 17 different conversations. That's a countless number of late nights or early mornings and rushing to hit deadline so that we can get this podcast out to you all at the same time every week. And there are a lot of hands that help that happen. Podcasts are a lot of work, y'all, for real. But it's also a labor of love. But it's also been a lifeline for me to what's real. The stories that the folks have been able to share with me, those are real stories. Those are actual things that have happened to people through the course of their lives. And those stories are how we see the world. It's through our own unique experiences that shades our vision. But I also know that we're a community. And knowing that we are a community means that all of our stories matter. And I want for all of us to see ourselves in these conversations with these folks that you may have never met. But you're like, yeah, that happened to me. Or, wow, I never thought about that in that way. So on this episode, we're going to do something a little bit different. And if you're new to Sticky Note Conversations, this is actually not a bad place to start because we're going to give some little snippets of some of the best of the last 17 episodes. Not the best of all, because as you all know, and I always say, this is one of my favorite conversations because they all are. But I wanted to give some little excerpts from some of the interesting conversations we had with my daughter Skylar, with the youngest school board trustee, Brenda Zamora, my play cousin, play brother, Derek Washington, the fabulous couple, Shanae and Ken. Those were great episodes. But also in Kenge, Ramon, and our music producer, Will. We all had some really, really great conversations. And they have been the highlight of my day and the highlight of my week sometimes. And just so you know, this podcast is done on the road a lot of the times. I travel a lot for work. And so I travel with a microphone and noise canceling headphones that I really only use for this podcast. Because also there may be somebody where I am that I want to talk to, and I always want to be prepared. But what you may not know is right now it's 3:42 in the morning as I'm recording this intro from a hotel in Chicago. But some of these conversations have been recorded in DC, Phoenix, in my home, the KUNV studios in Las Vegas, but also during that most recent earthquake in New York City. As that earthquake was happening, I was recording an episode of Sticky Note Conversations. And we just kept it moving because, you know, as they say, especially I think on Broadway, this show must go on. I say all that to say, thank you. Thank you for being on this ride with me. And don't forget, if you have thoughts, if you would like to be on Sticky Note Conversations, or you just have comments about some of the conversations that we've had, please, please, please reach out to me at stickynote@makeitworknevada.org. Again, our email is stickynote@makeitworknevada.org. I look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. I think we just kind of start jumping right into things and start talking. And I think first and foremost, I think I'd like people to know that we're having like a little bit of a slumber party here. We're just in the bed talking.
Yeah. Got our jammies on, you know.
Yeah.
Having a nice little kickback, little discussion.
Yeah. Well, so you are my daughter.
Yes, ma'am. So I've heard.
Have been for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And you are how old now?
I am 20 years old.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. I think it's always hard to wrap our heads around our children's ages at certain points in their lives. Like, oh my gosh, you're 2. Oh my gosh, you're 5. I can't believe you're double digits. You're a teenager. And then now you're 20, like you actually pay taxes and can vote.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I don't feel old enough. But this is where we are. And so I thought it would be really cool to have a discussion with someone your age about life and about the world as we are seeing it unfold. Because as much as I have felt like, I'm staying on the pulse of things, of what's happening and what's going on. And I'm cool enough to be on the different social medias and all of that. But, there's still like life is different for you than it is for me. And life is different for you at 20 than it was for me at 20. And so I don't know that we ever spend enough time really getting to know one another like we think we know each other. I think you know me, and I think I know you, and I think I know your siblings, my other children as well. But do we ever spend enough time having, really interesting current event conversations and figuring out how you feel about the state of the world and the state of your future? And I thought this was a good time to do that. So what do you think?
Yeah, my friends and I talk a lot about the state of our futures and just the world in general. I'm lucky enough to go to a school with so many people from so many different countries. So it's super international. So I get to meet so many different types of people and so many different perspectives. But I think something that at least a lot of my friends that we really worry about are just the lack of like housing that is available to us. It's just a lot of worry about what our lives are going to be like once we get out of college. It's where we feel very, very uncertain as to how we are going to be able to, sustain ourselves. I think college is a very lucky time where you're kind of coming into your own and you're deciding how you feel about things. You're meeting new people, having new experiences, all these different things. But it almost feels like there's kind of like a shadow behind us of we know that this relaxation period is not going to last.
Okay. So I want to back up a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to introduce yourself.
Oh. Sorry.
Well, let's do it this way. This is, this is how we do it. We jump into stuff and we forget the basics. And so I'm Erika Washington, your host of Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. And you are?
My name is Skylar Jordan. Like I said, I'm 20 years old. I am a junior in college studying
almost
science.
Almost
a senior. So I'm almost done. But yes, I will be 21 later this year. So
whoop whoop.
Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned housing as being something that you're concerned about. Why is that a concern?
That is a concern mainly because of money. It will be money and accessibility. A lot of the friends I have, though it is an international school, a lot of my friends are American. And the biggest worry, I would say, is, are we going to be able to afford to live on our own? And are we going to find a good place to live on our own, a safe place where we have access to everything that we need? Because I know so many people who, you know, when you're 15, 16, you get a minimum wage job, you work at Starbucks, you work at McDonald's, you work somewhere, and you're living with your parents, you know, you're still in high school, and you make some money, you know, just a little bit on the side if you want to go out with your friends or find the money to buy a car or anything like that. But you work these jobs, and then you move out, you go to college, you experience, and yet once we're done, we don't have the option to fully be adults because we can't find any place to live, and every place that we find is the rent is so high. So a lot of us end up just moving back in with our parents or with our family when we're, you know, early 20s, 22, 23, 24. And
well, what's wrong with that? Do you feel like you'd be less of an adult if you had to move back home?
Yes, I definitely think that.
Is that, would that feel like a failure?
I definitely think it used to feel like a failure. Maybe, I would say maybe my older sibling thinks that, but I would say for me personally, it's not necessarily that you are a failure. It's more like, it feels like our society has failed us, because I feel like I was told and it was marketed to me as, you know, once you finish college, you know, you get a job, get your own apartment or your own house, and you work and you save up to buy a house, you get married, you have kids, don't have kids, whatever, you live your life. But it feels like we are in such a financial crisis that we can't even make it past that first step of getting a place on your own.
Go ahead.
Because it's so expensive. It's so difficult to find, like I said, a safe place in the city or the state or the country that you want to live in. And it just doesn't make any sense anymore to do that. So it's not necessarily, I wouldn't feel like I failed if once I graduate, I have to move back in with you or with my dad. I wouldn't feel like I'm a failure. I would feel like, wow, the world has failed me. I can't complete these steps anymore.
Because you feel like you held up your part of the bargain.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Let me ask you this. It's something I've been thinking a lot about. You know, there's Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Libertarians, all different sort of parties. But, you know, we are basically, the United States is a two-party system.
Right.
And back in your great-grandfather's day, folks were, you know, proud card-carrying, you know, Democrats or Republicans or what have you. Mm-hmm. And they boasted about being a Democrat or a Republican or however they identified. It feels to me that is sort of fading away a little bit.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering how you see yourself. How do you identify? And I don't know if you've had any of these discussions with your peer group and how they identify. Not so much, you know, who they voted for, but do they identify with a party?
Party-wise, no. That's not something that I would say my age group really identifies with. We don't really, most of my friends, if they had to choose, me as well, we would say Democrat, but that's not the language that we use. We mostly use liberal and conservative, which is not necessarily saying that those are the same as Democrat and Republican. But as far as the actual parties go, I would not say that I am strictly one or the other, just because I feel like I've had so many qualms, so many reservations with each. Obviously, more one than the other, but we don't really use party system anymore. I would not say that is how myself or any of my friends identify.
How do you feel about us just pretty much having a two-party system, though? Do you feel, you have any thoughts or feelings around that?
I think that it can be very, like I said, very stifling, and it tends to lump people into groups. But what I really think is that it's the system itself that needs to be changed, because we really tend to talk about how, there are so many things wrong. There are so many things that are difficult. There's housing, there's healthcare, there's student loans, there's, the job market, there's all these different things. And those are all symptoms. Those are all, little problems that we want to kind of play whack-a-mole with. But the reality is that the entire system is not built for us, and our government is not listening to us. It feels like they lose interest once they've gotten the seat that they want. And, that is the main problem, is the system itself is not built to support young Black women. That is the main thing. So,
do you think it's built to support young people at all?
Not necessarily, no. And I would say that is more because we just don't have a lot of young people in office, and there can be a bit of a generational, I hesitate to say discrimination, because, there's kind of a trope that, people say, oh, young people, they don't know any better. And, this is kind of the way that it's always been. And, every one of my friends and I as legislators, they're all over, 35, 40, a lot of them are over 50.
35 old?
35 is not old.
I don't know. Over 35.
I don't know. 35 Gosh. Is not old. 35 is not old. I want to clarify that. But it can be very frustrating when you know that your legislator, your senator, your assembly person, your congressperson they are making decisions that will not affect them in 20, 30 years.
So how is your mom?
Every day is a new challenge. She's starting to take gummies, so that's always interesting. I found her with a sweet potato in her hand, asleep, looking just like she was on a whole other trip, which was really cool because she looked relaxed. But yeah, dementia's a whole other world.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, and having to take care of a parent and sort of become the parent, which I think is really funny for you, because I'm not really sure you're grown up yet.
I know, it's funny because I'll be doing something like putting on her jacket or something, and I see the humor in it, because of all the people on this earth who is now in charge of someone else's life. Who would have thunk it'd be me?
Sometimes I wonder why I let Derek come on the show, but he is one of my favorites. Listen to this. After this election, we need to, really have a conversation. But I feel like that's the same line after every election. It's like, now we need to, get down to the brass tacks, but this is all we have right now. It feels like such a poverty mentality. Like, I don't understand how we're going to keep having the same conversation every cycle, expecting something to be better, unless we do something better on the front side.
Okay, so here's the thing about that. So yes, the Democratic Party has been the boy who cried wolf far too much, and this time the wolf is actually at the door. If Donald Trump or any Republican gets elected as president, it's over for this country. It is over, and especially over for Black people. Let me tell you something. Every single group in this country has a thing about Black people. Every single group. And honestly, the only group that I feel, and I'm just going to say this, the only group that I feel safe with as far as allyship with Black people are Jewish people. They've always sort of been there for us, you know, and I mean, we have a complicated history with them as well. But the simple fact of the matter is, if the Republicans get in office, look at what they've already done. They've gotten rid of Black studies all across the country. Anything to do with diversity, inclusion, and whatever the E stands for, equity, I don't know. Anything that DEI, anything CRT, anything with anything that in any way, shape, or form has any positive thing to do with Black people has been erased across the South for sure, and would gladly be erased throughout the country with a Republican in office. Unfortunately, we are in, like on RuPaul's Drag Race, we are in a lip sync for your life moment right now. After this, yeah, I don't know how I feel about anything after this, but because we shouldn't be in this position, but we are at a point.
Do you consider yourself a part of? I know you don't want to say your age, but my goodness, I think it would be helpful.
I'm Gen X. I'm totally Gen X.
You're not a boomer.
See, here's the problem with that. I'm born in 63. They say Gen X starts in 64. I consider myself Gen X. I was born on the cusp between boomers and Gen X. But I definitely grew up Gen X with new wave and punk rock, the very first hip hop. I'm talking Sugar Hill Gang. So I grew up as a child in the 60s, and then as a teenager in the 70s and as an adult in the 80s. So I grew up in a time where I saw everything. We lived in Chicago during the riots. When Dr. King was killed in the 70s, we lived as the Huxtable life. In the 80s, everything got even better. And then as with all things Black, everything fell apart by the end of the 80s because we were targeted again. And yeah, so that's my background story. So basically, the good years were from the 60s to house music.
Y'all, now this one was one of my favorite conversations.
So are you saying you vote for Trump?
No, I'm not saying anything. This is funny because I expected this question for some reason. When I knew that you and I would be having this conversation.
Why?
I don't know. I just figured it may come up. It was really weird. And
well, there are a lot of Black men, and I didn't pull up the stats. I might try to find them, but there are, the stats that there were quite a few Black men who voted for Trump last go round. And
it's going to be more this time.
People who believe that he may not even identifying as Republican, but just believing that Trump did something for Black people or for the economy and for their bottom line that makes them believe that they should vote for him over a Democrat, Joe Biden or otherwise.
I feel that there are going to be more Black people that vote for Trump this time. I think a lot of that will depend on who the other options are, but based on what I'm seeing, I believe there's going to be more Black people that vote for Trump this time. Definitely more Black men. And I can understand why.
And why is that?
For the same reasons that I said before, where I feel like people...
He pardoned Kwame Kilpatrick and Lil Wayne?
Well, no, not just that, but more black men can relate to Trump than they can to Biden.
I would like to know how you and Kenge see yourself. Who are you?
Mm-hmm. So the identities that I feel like are easy for folks to understand and recognize, I am a Black woman, a mother, a Muslim woman, a writer, and an activist. So those are the titles that I am comfortable with carrying. And what I do in that body of existence, I advocate and I do work for Black mamas. I currently work at Mother and Justice, but wherever I work, whatever nonprofit I'm at, I have always been at a nonprofit. It responds to one of my identities. So I can only work in spaces that I really care about in that way. And what I do, like as self-fulfillment, as my personal legacy, I'm a writer, and I specifically write about the Black urban lesbian experience.
And so thinking about this year, 2024, in this upcoming election, are you working on electoral work? But two, how do you see this year playing out? And are there any concerns for you, both professionally as an activist and an organizer, but also, personally as a Black woman, femme, lesbian, mama, living in the South?
So we do, one of the campaigns that we do is around ending the Electoral College. We believe it's a dated system that needs to be ended. And it is why, like when Hillary and Trump ran, when Hillary won the popular vote, but Trump got office because he won the Electoral College. And I encourage folks, if you're not familiar with the Electoral College, just look it up. I didn't learn about it until I was an adult. I thought every vote was counted individually, and that's not how it works.
The Electoral College is a group of intermediaries designated by the Constitution to select the President and Vice President of the United States. Each of the 50 states is allocated presidential electors equal to the number of its representatives and senators. The ratification of the 23rd Amendment in 1961 allowed citizens in the District of Columbia to participate in the presidential elections as well. They have consistently had 3 electors. In total, the Electoral College comprises 538 members. A presidential candidate must win a majority of the electoral votes cast to win, at least 270 if all 538 electors vote. The Constitution grants state legislators the power to decide how to appoint their electors.
So we have a campaign around that. Then we have our issues, which are Black maternal health, affordable childcare, paid leave, and basic needs. All of those issues are at the top of everybody's campaign. However, I also believe that they are, hot button topics that people may or may not be committed to. So we're really watching to see who is elected and who will we then have to hold accountable and say, now, when you was running, you said you was going to do this for this issue. So there will be a lot of accountability regardless to who wins in my job professionally. My personal or informal opinion, this is just a raggedy ghetto mess that I think this time in politics, I believe if I were to come up with a theory about it, we're turning it into such a mess that it encourages people to not participate. The political electoral process into just I don't even want to say a joke because it's very serious, but we're making it so it just doesn't have any integrity to the point where it'll make people feel see, I knew this process was flawed. Flawed is one thing, but to have zero integrity, I'm just going to disassociate. So I think in that, a lot of folks are returning or buying into the theory that power is with the people. The solutions are already within the community, and that's the work that we're going to do. I do think there will be a huge kind of disassociation with folks participating in policy work, which then leaves the door open for people who are playing the long game to win. If we say we tire the Black folks, the women, the business owners, the queer folks, we tire all these minority groups who could swing some states and do all this stuff. We tire them out, make them not participate because they think this is a mess. They doing all the community work. Now we can just kind of come through and, for lack of a better term, just run a Boston, just do what we want to do over here. I think there'll be a period of time of that happening.
I know you didn't miss this episode, but if you did, make sure you go back on any of the streaming platforms and find this particular episode right here. I'm very excited, extremely excited that I have the illustrious, the talented, the youngest ever sworn into the Clark County School District trustee, mother of three, joining for Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. So I always let people introduce themselves and however they identify, what comes first, because sometimes it is that title, but sometimes it's something else. So I would like to welcome Brenda, and you tell me, who the heck are you?
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm Brenda Zamora. I'm a mother of three girls to be exact. I always like to mention that I have to handle 2 Leos and 1 Pisces, so just people get an idea what I have to deal with at home. They are 10, 9, and a 3-year-old, so it's a lot of fun and they keep me busy. I am a community advocate. I like to title myself. My hobby is being a Clark County School District trustee for District D, which is majority east side of Las Vegas, a little bit of central Las Vegas. I take all of UNLV and the Strip area. It's really exciting because it's a really diverse group of folks that I have in my district. So it's always just great meeting people in my community who just come from different backgrounds, and I get to learn, a little bit more about Las Vegas just as a whole. But that's me, just trying to save the day in education.
So for people who may not know, what does a school board trustee do?
So we set up policies in the district for just anything, any type of policy from admin all the way down to our schools directly. We also CCSD is really interesting because we are under a balanced governance. So I think it's really important to mention that we don't do day-to-day operations. That actually really falls under our superintendent. It's really difficult because as a trustee who really cares about their community, it's hard not to be able to kind of help step in and fix some of the day-to-day issues that we see in our community that are major issues that are happening. So we just focus on the policy side of it, and we do our strategic planning. We're actually in the middle of starting our strategic planning for the next 5 years because our 2024 strategic plan came to an end right now. So we're in a really interesting time as trustees, and I think as a board, that I'm really excited to see.
How are you feeling about election year? You're not on the ballot, number one. You do not have to run, but as a voter, as an individual, how are you feeling about this upcoming election? Are you worried? Are you hopeful? What are you thinking about?
So this, I think, is the first election year where I feel like I don't have any feelings. I've just been so focused with work. So my day-to-day job, does voter education, voter engagement, and my mind has been fully on how do we do education about down the ballot. And it's just been heavily focused on how can I help my community understand the roles of every person on their ballot. Not the federal, not all those big ones, because as we know, they don't affect your everyday life, right? So my mind has been fully focused on that. I've just been thinking about different ways to educate our voters, what's going to help, literally throwing things at the wall to see what might stick or not. What does that mean? Like, do we do TikToks? Do we do crazy TikToks? Do we do this? Do we do that? So I'm still continuing to do comms work in this world. But as an individual, I think you're the first one to really put it on my radar of how I might feel during this election. The only one that I race that I feel like I've put personal time in doing researches is the trustee races. Just because we have 7 voting members, and out of those 7, we have 4 that are up on the ballot. And that is crucial to know, because if you pay attention, if you follow along at CCSD and their own politics, some of the work doesn't get done and some of the policies don't get passed, and things just are not happening to help our community because we don't have the votes to do that. So having 4 seats up is really important. It's also interesting to see how we're weaving in the voices of our appointed members, because we also this year had 4 appointed members join from every municipality in Clark County, which has been really interesting. Great to see, but really interesting of how just the dynamics work. So just personally, I think I've only invested myself in the trustee races just because I know the importance of them and what it can mean. And we might be in a good time right now to do a shift, a huge shift for our communities who are really struggling in the district.
Has there ever been and I know this person is a woman, but has there ever been a actual superintendent that was a woman for CCSD? No. Not an interim, but actually hired? Okay. Maybe that's the problem. Just saying. I don't know.
The woman in there?
Yeah, that we might need a woman in there to straighten things out. Who knows? I don't know, but I don't know. It's a hard job no matter who takes it. I think like it's a big district, and there are obviously a lot of things happening that I don't think can be fixed by just one person. It certainly has to be the superintendent and the trustees and the legislature, and however the state board works in concert with all of this as well.
Yes, and I think something important to always mention is CCSD gets a lot of heat, because of our previous board meetings that we've had before the, majority of the people that are on the dais now. And people still hold that kind of against us, and I think that's how I feel like we ended up with our appointed members because of the chaos that used to be the board meetings before. I mean, those used to be shows. Those used to literally be, a show to watch. You would want
to. Oh yeah, I was there for some of those performances.
Yes, you would want to grab your popcorn, have your snack ready and just tune in. There's probably nothing good on the agenda, but you know that something was going to happen. There was going to be drama somewhere, and there were just drama, I want to say. So with the new board members last year, with the new board members this year, there's definitely been a shift. I think we actually get down to talking about really important issues. We get down with really great questions. We have very fruitful conversations. Yes, there's arguments here and there, but they don't get as intense as they used to. But if someone who is looking to become a superintendent, I feel like if you Google CCSD board meetings, the negative will always pop up. And that's what's going to make, I feel, the process very, very difficult, because we're not even interesting. We're probably not an appetite for most of these people to come, because we've just have that history of the board members not being able to work together for a very long time.
Okay, here's another episode.
That was one of the things that given the opportunity, having the newspaper and having a radio show, that I would talk, not to interview, I would just have conversation with them. Yeah. And I think they appreciated when we would just kind of like talk. And then I guess another thing happened because I would kind of be older than them. Mm-hmm. So they saw this fatherly figure where it's like they would like to hear my wisdom.
Wise one, tell us what you know. Please shine your wisdom on me. Yes. But that's what I wanted this to be. And I think I've accomplished it so far with most of the episodes. Some of them feel more like interviews because it's also, I think, it's uncomfortable when you put a microphone in front of certain folks and then they're just waiting and like, so what are you asking me? And so they answer that question. I'm like, let's just talk. Like, what you doing? What's going on? How do you feel about, this, that, and the third? But yeah, I think being able to have really deep conversations with people is how we get to know folks, but also how we bridge our differences, but also understand, what makes us us. Remember we used to have one here in Vegas?
Well, no, we still do. Miss Michelle. Miss Michelle in April. Coming up, 2024. Yeah.
So yes, there is that one. But I was thinking about the Cinevegas Film Festival, the big one that they used to do, and that was one of the first ones I think I had actually ever been to. I forgot who it started, Barbara De Niro or somebody. I can't remember who originally financed that, but they did it over at the Palms, and that's where I met Don Cheadle and Rosario Dawson and Shamar Moore, and I interviewed, I think, Rosario Dawson then, but this was for, I think, AOL or somebody. I used to write for anybody give me $5, I'd write for them to do something.
Well, now, speaking of a film festival, I think it's called the Dam Festival, the one that's up in Boulder City.
There is the Dam Film Festival.
That's the longest festival, film festival in Nevada, I would believe, and it's coming up here shortly. So, you have to be part of that scene if to go to a film festival, because you're constantly seeing works from people from all over, short films, documentaries, so forth and so on, and it's an adventure. It is an adventure, and the talent is there. That's the thing about it. But it's the one saving grace is now, because it's easier to get your things where you don't have to go to them. You could stream, you could put it online and so forth, and then people could see your work.
Yeah.
But it's very expensive, because I was involved with a documentary a couple of years ago, and wow.
It's a lot of work.
A lot of money. It takes lots and lots of money.
There's just one on Netflix around the We Are the World song.
I didn't see that yet.
I haven't seen it yet either, but I've heard really good things about watching that. So I'll probably watch that as well. But I love a good documentary that explains the how and why and how we got to a certain place. And I think that, where there's not Black newspaper, that Black documentaries can certainly fill in some of those gaps. But I think, to your point, being able to engage in finding a film festival near you to go to, and just seeing what's out there, just seeing what people are trying to make, and not just relying on what big movie studios are saying that this is what we're putting out there, and then that's it. Like, there's so much more variety on the shelf if we could, dig a little deeper. So I think that's really, really important. I have the pleasure of speaking with not just one, but two really fabulous people. And when I say today's conversation is amazing, it is amazing. So amazing, in fact, that it will also be a two-parter, which I love, because then we can dive even deeper into the lives of these profound people. So I'd like to introduce you to Shanae Watson Whitaker and her husband, Ken Whitaker. Shanae is the director of Michigan Campaigns for Reproductive Freedom for All, and Ken is the executive director of Michigan United. And also, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Please send us an email to stickynote@makeitworknevada.org. stickynote@makeitworknevada.org. So I'm really excited to have this fabulous couple on Sticky Note Conversations today. We've had an opportunity to run into each other on many occasions at the many different conferences that we attend over the course of the years, as we are all trying to make it work and fight for liberation and democracy and economic freedom for the community. So I thought it would be a really great idea to introduce my listeners to both Shanae and Ken, and talk a little bit about the work they're doing and figure out how on this earth they are able to balance, and if they are able to balance doing movement work and political engagement and civic engagement work and be married and raise a family and still like each other. Like all of that is the conversation, because they do like each other. So that, you know, if you didn't, then I'd be like, maybe not. But because I know that you do, and I know that y'all like being in each other's company. So I'm like, I had to figure out how they make that work. So welcome Shanae and Ken to Sticky Note Conversations. And so because you are a self-identified, you know, church girl and granddaughter of the church mother, doing this work specifically around abortion care and abortion rights, have you received any pushback or felt any conflict in working on this particular issue, or has that conversation come up with the community?
No. Honestly, no. I mean, there are people that are anti-choice, of course. But I can talk about what happened here in Michigan. Here in Michigan, 57% of voters said yes to Proposal 3. That meant to put a constitutional amendment to enshrine abortion rights in our Constitution. One of my jobs as the deputy director of the campaign was to build a coalition that represented all of Michigan. In my bio, it talks about, you know, the convener of this Michigan Voices work group that we had that actually launched this ballot initiative, and it was made up of groups from all over the state, including religious groups. And those folks felt that if we don't have this, what other rights are going to be taken away? One of my most profound conversations that I had throughout the course of the campaign was talking to religious leaders here in the city of Detroit. I'll be quick, but this is basically what summed up what I knew why we were going to win this campaign. When I went to this church, it was full of preachers in the city of Detroit. I spotted off the talking points, because you're not if you're campaign mode, you stick to the talking points, you stick to the stuff that you've been given, and you can veer away from it somewhat, but not really stay off. So I did the whole spiel with the talking lines and the talking points, and when the pastor said, "No, that's not it. That's not it. That's not going to cut it." So I said, "Okay, so let me be frank and let me be honest." So I basically told my personal story, and I'll say it right here. I was born in New York, came out here in 2008, living in New York City. Like I said, grandma was the head of the household. She was the everything, a mother to church, everything like that. When she passed away, my mom fell apart. My mom started taking drugs. She was into crack cocaine, all that. This is the 80s and early 90s. She fell into hard times. Like at one point, she couldn't pay the bills. So I am a teenager, about 14 years old. I'm a twin as well. And I'm the oldest of her children. I have 7 sisters and brothers. So I take on this responsibility as a teenager, 9th grade, to pay my mom's bills, to make sure we have the lights on. You know what I'm saying? To food, make sure we're cooking food, whatever, making sure my siblings got to school, and also making sure that I got to school as well. I couldn't do that. I am 14 years old, negotiating a contract to keep our lights on. I couldn't do that. So at one point we had to leave our home, couldn't afford to live there. Everything fell apart. We had to move in a shelter in the Bronx, New York. In that shelter, I seen the worst of the worst. I saw people get shot at. My twin has a bullet in her head to this day. She got shot. I've seen people commit suicide. I've seen like a lot. I was sexually assaulted in that shelter. At the same time, I'm having a boyfriend, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm not getting the things I need from my mom. My dad, God bless him, he's rest in peace. He's in the box downstairs. He wasn't doing anything for me. At that time, those times you sent your daughter down south. We didn't have that. I didn't have those relationships with my folks. Again, my matriarch, my queen, my grandmother passed away. So, coming up in this environment where you're seeing all this stuff, there's the drugs, the filth, the worst of the worst, I had to make a decision. Whether I, as a teenager, 17 years old, going to have a baby in this environment, in a shelter, or do I have this option of terminating my pregnancy? I chose to terminate my pregnancy. I made that decision because at that point, I did not have a support system. I was fortunate enough to be in a state where I can make that decision about my body without my mother's permission. At that time, my mom was like, she was out of it. Sometimes she'd be okay, and the next minute she was calling me somebody else, and she would accuse me of things, and she was really bad, to the point that she was physically and emotionally abusive to me. When I told that story, and I said, this is why I'm here today, so I understand, so folks can understand that there are other girls that have been in my situation that have to make those decisions about their body. They don't have a mom and dad to turn to. They don't have a trusted adult that they can confide in, that they have these resources that are available. I don't know if I'd be here today if I didn't make that decision. So when I said that to those pastors, they got it. They understood that, because not everybody has this ideal home that we hear about so much with the parents and everything. I'm fortunate enough as a parent myself now with grown children to provide that kind of love to my children, all 6 of them, 4 girls, 2 boys. But I didn't have that at the time, so I had to make that decision, and those pastors got it. And I've been unapologetic about telling my story, because I feel like we have to have this conversation in the community. We have to have this conversation in the community. We have to normalize these conversations, especially around trauma that young people endure when parents are not there for them. So I got the support of Black pastors throughout the state by telling my story. I also spoke to folks up in northern Michigan, rural Michigan, where there's hardly any Black folks there. And I get people telling me, I was in your shoes, but I'm white and I lived in northern Michigan. And that's what I had to deal with. So, telling my personal story really made a difference, and it really helped people know that they're not alone, that this is not something that should be taboo, that we should have conversations around this, and that we should have those protections in place. And again, I'm so proud of the work that the coalition that I work with, we put together, and having 57% of the state ratify this and pass this and put this in Michigan's constitution.
Ken, you said something about private shames to public power. Say more.
Yeah, I'm like, this society teaches you to be ashamed. It basically tells you to, just shut up and go along. Don't talk about, the bad things that are happening. I mean, we're taught to just keep your dirty laundry. And, I found through telling of stories, like Sinead was saying, that honestly, there's so many other people that are going through some of the same stuff, and you wouldn't even know it unless you open up your mouth and talk. So just like her, when I began to tell, my personal stories and things that were going on with me, I started to not feel so alone. It's not that, misery loves company. It was more of like, damn, okay, it's not just me. And then it got to the point of, all right, well, if all of these other people are going through the same thing, and we start talking in the same voice and demanding change, it starts to turn into a movement, and then a movement in order to change policy to make our lives better. So that's what I'm like, turning our private shames into public power. And that's, something I learned at Michigan United. When I walked into Michigan United, I was saddled in payday loan debt. I thought it was just my fault. I just done something so wrong, and I deserved this pain that I was going through that was affecting my family in ways that were just unimaginable. And then I told my story in front of about 200 people, and it was scary at first, but everybody was just nodding their heads. And then I asked the question, I'm like, how many of y'all, got payday loan debt? And it seemed like a third of the room raised their hand, and another third of the room had it and gotten out of it. And I'm like, wait a minute, we're all having the same problem, and then a very smart organizer is like, so what are you going to do about it?
Yeah,
what if I told you
is expensive?
Right? What if I told you that these payday loan companies are just in your neighborhoods? They're preying on Black and brown neighborhoods. Then the question came, was like, do you have banks in your neighborhood? No. Do you have supermarkets in your neighborhood? No. Do you have a lot of liquor stores in your neighborhood? Yeah. What if I told you that this is a plan to divest in your neighborhood and take away good schools and take away access to inexpensive avenues of obtaining money? And it opened up my eyes and opened up a lot of eyes. And as we just began to band together, it led into a campaign, that we ran against the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to change the payday loan laws. And then I find myself on the steps of the DNC demanding that Debbie Washington Schultz step outside and take delivery of these 5,000 signatures of payday loan sufferers, that demand that the laws were changed and that, that we're actually being preyed upon. And, you can't say that, it's just our fault when you just had a freaking predatory, mortgage bubble bust. When you're being preyed upon and you feel like you don't have any other choice, hell, you want to live. So you take that step regardless of how much it's going to hurt. And then when people start to learn how much you pay in fees and how it's literally a debt trap, you start to pay attention. I wound up in front of Congress testifying about this. And I'm happy to say that, some laws were changed, but, that same story just plays itself out issue after issue after issue, whether it's fighting against deportations and for fair immigration laws, whether it's for fighting for criminal justice system and having good time credits or rehabilitation credits. That same story plays out. And that's telling your story, because they're the threads that actually connect each of us together. Otherwise, we just walk around this earth feeling like we're alone and feeling ashamed. And that's exactly how this society, this government actually wants us to feel. Because the moment that we get together, and that's why I talk about that 3.5%, the moment we get together and realize that we're all going through some of the same stuff, and we start to yelling and screaming together, can't nobody stop us. Nobody can stop us.
Thanks for listening to Sticky Note Conversations with Erika Washington. Hosted and executively produced by Erika Washington, with music, mixing, and editing by Black Gypsy LLC. Special thanks to KUNV 91.5 in Las Vegas. This show is powered by Make It Work Nevada, a project of Tides Advocacy.